me straight. Please guide my way onto the path of my deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah, I'm calling your name. Oh, Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk on your favorite channel, Huda TV. I'm your host, Arkham Rashid. Tonight's episode is about the problems that the Muslim youth around the world face. So I want to start off by welcoming and introducing my guest to you. On my right hand side, brother, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead.
My name is Idris, and I'm from America. I'm teaching English and also studying Arabic and memorizing Quran here.
All right, Idris, welcome back to the show. I mean, we've had you on for many programs and we've enjoyed it, so we're looking forward to this conversation, inshallah. Brother next to him, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead.
I'm Omar Khalid. I'm from Egypt, and I work as a freelance translator.
All right, welcome back to the show, Omar.
Thank you so much.
It's wonderful to have you guys on again.
It's a pleasure for us.
Thanks.
If I can come on to this side, brother, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead.
My name is Bilal Abdullah. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. I live in the great country of Egypt. Currently studying and working and just enjoying my time here.
All right, Bilal, it's wonderful to have you back on Let's Talk once
Thank
again.
you.
Brother next to him, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, my name's Ilyas Townsend, here from London, and just here tried to study and trying to benefit myself and my family whilst I'm here, inshallah.
All right, and may you find benefit, inshallah, from your time here. And once again, it's lovely to have all you guys on for the show today. Now, as I said in the beginning of my introduction, that the show is about the problems that the youth around the world, the Muslim youth especially around the world, face during this day and age. Now, what I want to start off is, I want to start off the program by saying that I think problems would vary and differ from country to country, from society to society, from culture to culture. So I want to start off by getting your thoughts on that. Idris, if you can start us off.
You want to know about America or
No, I'm just saying, what do you think would it, yeah.
Yes, in general, I think it depends, depending on the surroundings and what are facing the different nations. The problems that are happening in the UK are nothing like the problems that are happening in America as far as the Muslims are concerned. I have some friends in the UK, and to me they have some of the strangest problems that are unique just to the UK.
Yes.
So it's good that someone who's wise enough to be able to know this and just don't have blanket answers for, oh, this is what Muslim you should do. It's not a blanket thing. It's something that's individual and specific for individuals in areas concerning their specific problems.
Let's hope you don't get hate mail from the UK.
Well, shots fired, Ilyas.
I hope he does get hate mail.
If we can go over to Brother Omar, what's your thoughts on it?
Just an expansion of what the brother said, that every country has its own problem. I think there is also some problems that they are like very general.
Yes.
And if we fix this problem in one nation, we can fix it in all nations. Because this is an intrinsic and inherent problem with the youth and the Muslims.
Yeah, I actually want to get into that. That's a very good point that you made. Maybe you can give us examples later on in the show about these problems that apply to everybody, whereas majority of the problems obviously apply to certain groups or certain people or certain countries. But like you said, there are problems that are applicable to everybody. Everybody faces these problems. If I can come over here to Brother Bilal, what's your thoughts on it?
The problems facing the youth, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the youth and the older generations, maybe parents, grandparents, or those in authority, schools, etc., or even especially in the masjid, their administrations, they may feel detached from the message itself. They may feel like no one is listening to them. They have ideas. They may want to put forth things. Some of them are excited, but they can't really be excited about the masjid or I guess their Islamic life because their input is not sought. When they do have ideas, they're not listened to, and I think in some places, especially in America, I saw for myself, there's like an old guard that is holding on tight to the reins of power and the keys of ideas, and you can't push forward unless somebody who's obviously much older, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone who's older, but at the same time, there is a transitioning going on from one group to the next, and the youth should be prepared to take over. That doesn't mean we get in the keys to the palace, but it doesn't mean that we walk away. But at the same time, there's also a guiding and maturing process that is between the youth and the elders, and I think in some places, some people are not doing that. And sometimes the youth feel frustrated because they have energy, and they have motivation and desire to be involved. But sometimes that motivation and desire and energy is killed, you know, and is misdirected and it goes in the wrong direction. And I think we can see several examples in the world where youthful energy is not using it in a good way. I think we're seeing people actually using it in the wrong way in certain hot spots and points in the world today.
And that's quite interesting. What I understand from what you are saying here is that there's a generation gap, that the older generation doesn't understand the youth to a certain extent. It could be that, or it could be Bilal was trying to run for president of his masjid.
No, I don't want to be president. No way.
Ilyas, if we can come over to you, what's your thoughts on this?
On problems facing Muslims? I mean, it's kind of hard. I mean, I sat in this chair because I wanted to go last, but everyone's taking their to say. But I think problems facing Muslim youth, it's already been mentioned that they vary from place to place, and even within a city it would vary. You know, the problems that face Muslim youth, for example, in North London, they differ completely from South London. Obviously, I'm from London. So I think it's really specific. It is so specific, and it kind of leads on to what the solutions are. I think it's going to be impossible for us to give blanket answers. Okay, if you follow A, B, and C, then everything will be fine, and you'll live a happy life and go to paradise. I mean, I wish it was that simple. I'll try and follow that advice myself, but one of the biggest problems I feel is the generation gap that Brother Bilal mentioned not too long ago. There's a very, very big generation gap. Now, growing up and living in London, what I found was when I was teaching in a mosque or in a madrasa, the teachers that had a lot of the knowledge, that had studied and learned a lot of Quran back home in whatever country they're from, they had certain ways of teaching. There are traditional ways. If a child misbehaves, they stand up with 2 hands up.
That punishment actually hurts, but
it hurts. So a problem that we had in the UK was the children, they went to schools and never were subjected to that kind of punishment. The complete opposite. You do not even touch a child. In London, if 2 children are fighting, the teacher's not allowed to physically separate them. They have to watch them and let them finish. They're not allowed to physically touch. Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. We could tell stories.
That's the UK.
Yes.
Seems like Idris was right.
That hate mail's coming. Yeah. So the generation gap is a big one. Generation, and also the cultural difference. London is a place that has many different cultures, nationalities, and customs. So the parent that has the back home mentality just cannot relate to the child whatsoever. So many times, even when I became Muslim, I was maybe just doing some basic Arabic and Islamic studies in the mosque, but the children felt that they could speak to me because I related to them more than their parents did. I went to the same schools that they went to. Maybe I knew some of their older brothers, etc. Whereas the parents just were absolutely clueless as to what was going on in their lives. So that was a really profound point that I came across when I was in London.
And it seems like the general trend, or majority of, I wouldn't say majority, but many of the problems that the youth face is because of this misunderstanding between the youth and obviously the leaders of the community or the older generation. What do you think is the actual core reason? Why do you think the older generation, for example, won't listen to the youth, won't take their ideas, won't have the same understanding as them? What do you think is the core problems between the core problems that expand this gap between the youth and the older generation?
For my opinion, it probably has to do with we're in a point in time that is unprecedented before, like any time before. the advancement of technology, the way life is moving forward, it's obviously going towards the signs of the Day of Judgment, is that life and things are changing at lightning speed. So in the past, the gap wasn't so big because the generations were alike in some ways. They didn't have these huge major differences. Nowadays, it's not just, age. It's understanding. It's what's going on in the world around them. It's what's technologies around them. I mean, my mother doesn't even know how to use a computer very well. And then, these kids nowadays are texting like crazy. They don't even know what old phones are. So the technology, the life, the things, it's just light years apart. So it's creating a big gap because of so much differences, unlike there was before.
Absolutely.
So they have to learn how to somehow overcome this and bridge these gaps some kind of way, which I don't really have the answers for that. But at least knowing the problem itself is the first solution to fixing the problem, is knowing it.
Yeah, understanding the problem, trying to figure out where they went wrong or where it's going wrong, actually. Umar, if I can come over to you, if you can give us your thoughts on that. And also, I'd like to ask you, earlier on, you mentioned that there are problems or issues that face the youth all around the world and that are very similar no matter where they are.
Before I get to the example, what the brother was talking about is something called the comfort zone. The oldest guard, like the brother said, we as human beings, not because they are old people, we are against change. We don't change easily. We feel threatened if we change our attitude or we change our lifestyle, except if we get convinced very hardly that it is something right. So I'll give an example for this. Like, we always, of course, and this, I'm not challenging this, that maybe movies, they have bad things in them, novels, they have bad things in them, but the fact that they are not going to go away. Youth are going to see them when they turn on TV. They're going to see movies, they're going to see cartoons, they're going to read novels. So where is the alternative? This is a very important question. So why the Muslims are not producing something like it? And we have the money, we have the resources, we have the intellect, but we just have to have cooperation. We have to have a goal for all Muslim nations. We're about 1.5 billion Muslims, so if we can do this, we can do very good change. Like, I'll give a very weird example. I just read a book from about one day, I finished it. The name of the book is Batman and Psychology. So a psychologist is talking about Batman in a psychological way, about everything. The father figure, the children, the trauma, the antisocial attitude. So that gives us, an intuition, an understanding that these people, when they produce these movies, they understand psychology. They make these movies to get into the subconscious of us as youth, everyone, not the Muslims, of course. It's not a conspiracy theory. Everyone. Why? Because we easily get influenced by something that is emotional. Our emotions are very essential to us. So we have to study this. We have to have the same. We are Muslims, and we have to do like we talked about maybe in previous episode, like doing the steps tawakkul to do something. This is part of the tawakkul, I think. This is my point of view.
That's very interesting. I'm going to go over here to Bilal to get his thoughts on that. Obviously, Bilal enjoys your psychological
especially Batman. But no, I mean, when he first said Batman, I know that many folks may actually want to laugh, but actually there are different things that I've seen also that have discussed Batman, because as a character, he's a character going back to like the 1920s, 30s, whatever, and there's a lot of psychological issues going on with him. I mean, we're talking about a guy who wears a cape and wants to go out at night and fight criminals, right? So it does sound kind of crazy, even though it's a character that many people love, right? So I get where he's going with that. I agree. For me, I think that there's two strategies. For the elders, it's that even me, I'm 36. I mean, I can look at someone who is as a teenager, and I may not deal with them and respect them in the same way that they wish to be, because of where they're at. So it's all about, as if you're older than someone, remembering that once upon a time you were in their shoes. Try to understand them and use wisdom, and when you're dealing with the youth, and how to get them to your side, or just to even understand them, because we need each other. For the youth, I believe it's all about patience, controlling your energies, dua, and peaceful and respectful engagement. Sometimes the youth don't know how to deal with the elders either, and that also causes a problem, you know. And we're all at different stages in our life, and how we deal and handle things. So I think the first thing is sometimes people just, it's not that everyone dislikes your idea, it's that they just don't know how to speak with you, and that pushes people away oftentimes. So really, it's not even just so much the message, it's how it's delivered. And so I think everyone has to remember to be respectful to each other, and deal with each other in a reasonable and Islamic manner.
That's very interesting. Ilyas, if we can get your thoughts on it.
What's the question?
Batman.
I'm thinking of Batman.
He's about to comment on Batman as well.
Is Batman Muslim?
Well, actually, Batman should be a Muslim because
He
he has very good characteristics. He's selfless, right? He's not, you know, he's doing things for others. I'm not joking, you know.
Well, he's a bit of an extremust though, because he's going against the law.
Let's leave Batman alone. Go ahead, brother Ilyas.
Jarh Ta'deel of Batman. I think one of the generation gap. I think one of the key issues is life experiences. You know, life experiences, because our parents have just had a completely different life to young people, or where I'm from anyway. My parents grew up in Jamaica, and you know, for the first time, maybe 3 months ago, I actually sat down and had a conversation with my dad and found out about his life, and it's not a life I could have lived at all. He was talking about when he was young, he had to work in the field in Jamaica. He had to work in the field, and he said it was hard labor. Like really hard, like picking beans and
Sugarcane?
Sugarcane, yeah. And he was doing it for his grandma, and she was harsh with him, like really harsh. And it was talking about there wasn't enough money for all of the children to go to school. So even though he was the cleverest of all of the children, because he was the male, he had to do the work, whereas the females, they went to school. So he taught himself how to read, write, do maths, and these things. And, you know, eventually he left and went to UK, met my mum, and, you know, whatever, and I'm here now.
Yeah.
But I was taken aback. And so, for example, things like education, he values it much more than I did.
Yeah,
you know, I grew up,
education
education was standard for me. Every child goes to school. If you don't, then parents get in trouble with the police, and social services come, and etc. But school for me was, I didn't want to go to school. It was just something to do because everyone had to. Whereas my parents, they saw it as, you know, this is a big privilege. You know, you're going to school, and you know, just respect that my parents would expect me to have for the teachers. You know, the teacher says something, you have to listen. Whereas I was like, the teachers, like, they get beat up. You know, it was like that. It was like that in London growing up. So the life experiences are completely different. And as his brother Idris mentioned, the advent of technology now, everything has changed. You know, when I was in Egypt, there was a problem on my road or my parents' house, and I messaged everyone, said, what happened on the road? And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, what you mean I found out before you, and you live in the house, but I knew that there were police on the street and you didn't even know. That's just social media. So these things are just changing the way we live and the way we perceive things, you know. So this leads to a big generation gap. My dad does not know how to use a computer. You know, Idris said his mum barely knows how to use a computer. My dad does not know how to use one, full stop. You know, so now he's got a mobile phone, and you know, he's learned how to do things now. But before that, I mean, what would he have been doing? You know, waiting for the post. You know, and we look at it as small because we grew up in it. But I remember I was in my madrasa, and I was discussing old computers, because everyone was talking about PlayStation and Xbox, and I was saying, you know, we had old computers called Atari and Commodore, where you had to put tapes in, and if it doesn't work, you have to blow it. And they were like, "Sir, you're old. you're really old." And I was someone that they could relate to. So imagine younger people when they get older. So the world is changing completely right in front of our eyes. So I found one of the difficulties was contextualizing Islam for them. Because growing up, maybe the parents were just like, this is a mosque, this is where you pray, don't question me about it. Whereas now, the young children, they want to know, why? Why do I have to do this? You know, why do I need to learn about Islam? You know, one of the questions we had in the madrasas, or how do you know Islam is a true religion? I mean, and parents won't know how to answer those questions because they never grew up in that environment. So the situation is completely different. The generation gap is wide. So, you know, it's a big issue of the Muslim identity. What is it like? Because essentially, the parents, they want their children to go to school, maybe they want their children to pray, they want their children to mix with the opposite gender, some parents anyway. So essentially, you're asking your child to be just completely strange. And they need support in that. It's hard to be a stranger. You know, it's very hard. So like the big issue I find is that contextualizing Islam to make young people feel that they are being listened to by their elders, as Bilal mentioned. And as Omar mentioned, what alternatives do they have? Okay, that's haram, but okay, what else are you giving me? You know, so I can talk so deeply on the subject because dealing with those young people and hearing their issues, you know, for example, things like abuse. One of the students, he said, you know, my uncle was abusing me sexually. I can't go to my mum and, you know, in that age group is kind of like brush it under the carpet, don't ever discuss it. You know, so what mechanisms do we have? How do mosques deal with these issues? Because, you know, going back to what Bilal said, sometimes the elders in the mosques, they don't really want to listen. You know, this is a mosque, we pray, we lock the door after salah, leave. We don't even want young people in the mosque. Right? You've had that, you get it, isn't it? We don't want young people, don't know noise. So the young people are reading, you know, the Prophet ﷺ, he stopped salah one time, or he stopped the khutbah because his grandson was playing, etc. So how do we reconcile between the two? You know, and it plays a big role, plays a big part in how our youngsters understand and practice their Islam. They may begin to hate Islam even though they're hating things which are un-Islamic. You know, it's an important. So we can go into so many different topics here. But
I mean, there's so many points that you mentioned that I actually want to comment on. The first is obviously we can see that the generation gap is nowhere to be closed. There's no way we can close it completely. So the gap is always going to be there. But like Brother Bilal was mentioning, what we can do is that each side needs to try to understand that, you know, there's a difference, and we're not going to completely understand the youth, but we need to respect their opinions. We need to allow them to, you know, take initiative. And like Brother Bilal was saying, that it's important for the youth to get involved in the masajid, whether they vote for Bilal as president of the masjid or not. It's important, but it is important because there are issues that the youth can understand when they deal with other youngsters, whereas the adults won't understand it. So it's very important for each masjid or each community center for Muslims to establish an area where young Muslims can deal with each other and help solve each other's problems, or at least those adults that can communicate with the young Muslims. And I think that if one is not able to establish that in his community, say the masjid is not giving him any opportunity to do such a thing, then he could still take an initiative and start his own sort of support group or own sort of community. And there's so many ways we can do it. I mean, online, Facebook, there's so many ways that you can do it in this day and age. Before we take this conversation any further, we're going to go for a short break. So after we come back from the short break, we're going to continue talking about the problems that the Muslim youth face around the world. So stay tuned.
How perfect my advice and a praise. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi. Subhanallahi. How perfect you are, Allah. Subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Allah is my heart's speech. Your mercy is what I beseech. Keep in my heart your remembrance, and in your deen allow me to advance.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I praise Allah the Almighty alone, and I send the best peace and blessings upon His most beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Brothers and sisters, welcome to a live edition of your program, Ask Huda. I cannot pinpoint or determine the fate of any individual by name and say this person is in heaven or this person is in hell. This is not up to me. But we have the general guidelines and the ruling with regards to those who die in a state of Islam and those who die in a state of any religion other than Islam. Fatima asked, do ladies have to call the iqamah before every compulsory prayer? No, they don't have to call neither the adhan nor the iqamah. There are two different opinions, brother Abdul Latif, due to the understanding of the ayah, which says when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam to do the following. He said, يا أيها النبي قل لأزواجك وبناتك ونساء المؤمنين يدنين عليهن من جلابيبهن ذلك أدنى أن يعرفن فلا يؤذين. And the names of Allah, brother Abu Bakr, should be توقيفية. The term توقيفية means we do not suggest to Allah a name. We do not ascribe to Him a name based on our assumption.
Subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah.
Welcome back to Let's Talk. Now, before we went for that short break, we were discussing the problems that the youth around the world face. So now what we want to do, we want to get into how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with the youth and how he interacted with them. Brother Bilal, if you can start us off, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. The Prophet ﷺ, the one thing that strikes out to me the most is the life of Usama ibn Zayd, radiallahu anhu. I think about how he was a leader among the Muslims and led many of the other companions into battle. He was trusted with leadership, and he was sent by Prophet ﷺ for this great and honorable mission. And I think, and he was very young. Was he 16, 17 at the time? Young. Very young. So we're talking about leading one of the most successful militaries in the history of mankind into battle, right? And leading those who were
senior companions.
Yes, senior in age, and in many other ways his senior, right? But he was the one that was best suited for that particular job at that time. And I think one thing we can draw from that is the fact that we see here the elders entrusting the youth to do very important tasks. And we see that if someone, let's say someone is 50, 60, 70 years old, we don't live forever. So our children have to take over and take the mantle from us. So do we just die and just find out on their own how to do it? No, it's a job in training kind of thing. And I think that's a lesson that we can learn from that today on how that we can put that trust on our children to do those important things that keep our communities afloat. I think our talk overall crosses two things. In some countries, the masjid is a community center where there are many programs and events, and you can see in them a big bureaucracy. We joked about me running for president, and we do have presidents.
I didn't think we were joking, but
no, be loud for president. No, but we have in these masajid in the West. The Emir of the Masjid. My older cousin is the Emir of a Masjid in Indiana. So there's a big bureaucracy. The president, vice president, the leader of this committee, the leader of that committee. And so these kind of things, you see this bureaucracy with the Masjid in the West. I'm assuming in the UK as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So, but when you come to countries, let's say like in the Middle East, like let's say Egypt or someplace like that, the masjid is not a place where you have community events and you see big chipper houses for the Eid, and kids are out playing, and people are organizing the bake sale, and people are organizing this event and that event.
Well,
No, you just go in and pray and you walk
government-run
out.
as well. Like most Muslim countries, they'll have masjids and financed completely by the government, so they really don't need this sort of, who's going to be in charge, who's going to look at the finances.
Right, exactly. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because we have to also keep in mind that as we're talking about the masajid, that there are different experiences happening. And I think our friend in front of me would be better to talk about the masajid here in Egypt and how it compares to the West in regards to how to get the youth involved there. Because that's something I'm not really experienced with. But it is something that's very interesting. I just don't know how they do it. So maybe the brother can help us.
And just to quickly comment on your idea of the difference between the masjid, I actually find it very interesting how they have the masjids in the West where it's so engaging, you can say, in a way. Like during Ramadan, you see they have the youth night where everybody comes in, stays over the night, they play games, they have speeches. So in a way, it's very engaging and it's interesting.
Yes,
it's a community center, it's an establishment that is for all Muslims to come together and, like you said, bake sales, and they always got the good brownies. And
Well, the good falafel out front from the Palestinian brother, with some extra spice on top.
Brother Ilyas, if we can go to you, get some of your thoughts on how the Prophet ﷺ engaged with the youth.
I think Bilal touched on, that's a very important point, was the Prophet ﷺ would empower youth and give them things to do because they've got the energy, they just need to be directed. So the example that really come to my mind was, in fact, the opposite. Now, before the Prophet ﷺ entered Medina, as we know, there were two tribes, and also the Khazraj, they would always fight. And they were fighting for so long, they forgot why they were fighting. Get it in London as well, these gang wars, people fighting, killing, they don't know why they're doing it, So, obviously after the Prophet has come to Medina, also the Khazraj, they've come together, and they're okay. So, but there were some people that would benefit from them actually fighting and would sell them weapons at interest. So, on one occasion, one of the elders that used to benefit from their wars, he would say to one of the children from Al-Aus, do you remember when you had the upper hand against Al-Khazraj? And he would go to the other one and say the same thing, and then eventually those two young people who had nothing to do started arguing amongst each other. And then one of them, he called his group, said, "Oh, Aus, come to my aid. And then the other one said, "Oh, Khazraj, come to my aid." And then the two groups, were about to start fighting again. And when the Prophet ﷺ heard about this, he rushed towards them and says, "Are you going to go back to Jahiliyyah whilst I'm still amongst you?" And it was a very strong reprimand. So one thing I find here is that, leading on from Bilal's point, that the Prophet ﷺ, one of the most important things he done was give the youth something to do. Because if they don't, then they can fall into this nonsense. And it's exactly the same, what we see today in London anyway. Or in the Muslim world in general, the youth are complaining, we don't have anything to do. What can we do? And if you don't shape them and put them on a path towards something, then the street will raise them, as they say.
Yeah.
They'll be raised by the street, what the people are doing. There's so many, we talk about Islam is against drugs, Islam is against this, Islam is against that. But if we look at ourselves, there's Muslim youths are into everything that everyone else is into. Yeah. There's nothing to distinguish them. Apart from their faith, etc. But in terms of action, before I was a Muslim, I don't know if Bilal and Idris can say the same thing. When we spoke to Muslims, and they would try to give us da'wah, we would say, well, you do the exact same things that we do, like exactly the same. As a matter of fact, you lot are worse. Because you do things that we wouldn't do. So if young people don't have anything to do, then they're just going to do, X, Y, and Z, which is just completely haram, give a bad name to their religion, and push people away from Islam. So one of the great remedies that Prophet ﷺ done was to preempt, like a preemptive strike. Give them something to do before someone gives them something to do. And for me, it's a great wisdom from the Prophet ﷺ.
And it's very interesting because when you take a look at how the Prophet ﷺ intervened, it shows us that, you know, when we were speaking earlier about the generation gap and how we can close this, and both sides need to come and understand each other, you can see that the side that's in charge currently, which is, you know, the elders, they should be the first ones to take initiative, because it's their responsibility to ensure that the future of the youth, the future of the community itself, you know, is guaranteed. It's going to be, you know, always on an incline instead of a decline. So as leaders, it's their responsibility to make sure that the youth are engaged and to involve them and to train them, like Bilal said, you know, to let them understand that, you know, this is how you're going to have to carry it on, to give them that training, that extra push. If I can come over here to you, Brother Idris, what's your thoughts on this?
I think the question was about an example from the Prophet.
Prophet said something else.
For me, a key thing that he did was he actually showed the youth that he was concerned and that he cared and that he wanted to know about them genuinely. He didn't just like, okay, tell me about your day, that was nice, now go on and play. He really wanted to know and involve them and make them feel like human beings, not just, you know, subservient, you know, younger people who don't know anything. He actually was concerned about them. He inquired things from them, and he, like the brother said, he involved them in things. This is important to treat them as they belong, not as if they're like, okay, you know, they're the separate part of the Muslim society. Treat them as though they belong with us. You're a part of this mechanism that makes it work, and without you, it won't work. And let them know their importance. And some of the examples that came to my mind are few, but to go over a brief one is like the one when a woman came to ask the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ a question, and one of the youth was there, and apparently this woman was amazingly beautiful, and he just found himself looking at her like, wow, amazing, you know. And this is the youth. They have the youth. This is how anyone, a natural man would be. If a beautiful one comes from him, this happens.
Not just youth, man. That's
Listen.
So how did the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how did he deal with it? Did he like harshly criticize him and say, you know, what are you doing? You know, have some taqwa, you know. No, he gently grabbed his chin and turned his head. He turned again. He grabbed his chin and turned the head. And the third time he grabbed his chin and turned his head until the youth realized, oh, okay. And he lowered it and he stayed away. So how he dealt with them is amazing. Most of us wouldn't do that. Imagine if this was your son, if you have a son, if he's looking at a woman. First thing most parents nowadays would be, pow! You know, upside their head. So this is a brief example of how he dealt with them. Another one to add on this and keep it brief, I won't go over the long story. It was that they were coming back from an expedition, and the Rasulullah ﷺ was riding with the youth. He didn't just like, okay, you're young, get on the floor and walk, you know. While I ride. He rode with the youth. They both were riding, and he started asking him, you know, questions about his life. Tell me about your life. You know, are you married? And inquiring about him the way you would a good friend. How is your life? What's going on with you? And the youth had told him. He asked him, "Are you married?" He told him, "Yes." "Is your wife young?" And he told him, "No, my wife is old because my father died, and I needed someone to help me with my father's, you know, my siblings, because I'm young. I don't know how to deal with kids, so I need someone who's experienced. So I made an older woman." And the Rasulullah told him, you know, why didn't you marry someone young so you can play with? And he found out why. Okay. So, but the point was that he actually inquired about his life. I mean, the youth, I can tell you, I teach kids, when you actually show them that you care, this is when you start getting the results from them. When they see that you know, they know fake. They can read fake from a mile away. When you actually show them that you have concerns and that you really are, and you treat them in a gentle way, and that you have this guidance for them, they tend to respond better. As vice versa of, you know, the older generation, the old guard is, they take off their shoe, or they have a stick. You know, this is their way of doing it. Instead of trying, and they don't know anything about their kids. Some of the older ones, like the brother said, they don't know anything about the kids. I learned some things about kids that the parents don't know, and I'm not the parent. Because they don't have that relationship with the kid. And the Rasulullah wasn't like this with any other youth, not just like his youth, like if he had, not with his daughters, with any sibling. any youth, he was
had
this
that
way.
connection.
It was a
open.
special connection with him.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah.
Omar, if we can get some of your thoughts.
Actually, the brother reminded me
Sure.
of something even more harsh than the companion who looked at the girl. One of the companions went to the Prophet and asked for the permission of committing the full act.
Yeah.
Zina.
So some of the companions actually, they were sitting there and the boiling, we want to stop him. Yeah. So the Prophet just sat him and put his hands on his heart and asked him certain questions in logical way, like the brother said, that maybe some of the Muslim youth, they go and ask questions, and parents, they don't want to be asked these questions. They feel it's scary for them. But the Prophet didn't deal with it like this. Don't ask this again. This
See,
is haram.
and sorry, not to
Sure.
not to interrupt, but that's one of the major issues. We think that the Prophet ﷺ was a super strict guy that if somebody came to him with a question, astaghfirullah, don't ask this type of question. That's not how he was. He was so open to every single thing. It's natural for a human being to have questions. Some people have different questions than others, but the Prophet ﷺ was so open to everybody's questions, so welcoming. I'm going to let you continue.
Yeah, no problem. So, and the answer was logical. So that's why the companions after that, they commented on what the young companion did. They said that he never committed anything related to this thing that he asked about. Why? Because it was answered. The question, when it's answered, then your behavior is going to change.
Just to add on, the answer was that he told him, would you like your mother to do it? Would you like your sister to do this? How would you feel? He appealed to his intellect, like his feelings of, how would any of you feel if your mother did this act you're asking me to do?
The golden rule.
So, and it touched him in his heart, so this is how he changed him. He showed concern.
So far in the episode we've been speaking about, obviously the episode's about problems with the youth, and I found that most of us think that the main problem with the youth, that the youth face, is that generation gap. I wanted to quickly touch upon another issue or another problem that the youth face, and maybe we can speak about this, which is not knowing or not understanding their religion well. So many times you find that the youth don't understand their religion. They have nowhere to go to, like Brother Ilyas said, when it comes to finding out about their religion, and because of the society that we live in, because of social media, you have connections to everything online. It raises questions that the youth have nowadays that the older generation never had. If we can get a little bit into this topic, inshallah, Idris is going to start.
In my view, this is a big issue because lack of knowledge is one of the core problems of the youth. It leads them to, basically following one end or the other extreme. Either to the extreme of where everything is fine, don't worry, it's so fine, I don't want to be, this happy-go-lucky feeling. Or the ones on the other side who are basically making takfir on everybody, and they're so harsh and haram. It leads them to either one of these because they don't have any knowledge. They don't have anybody to guide them and say, relax, sit down. You don't know anything, and help them. This lack of knowledge is a huge thing. We need the outlets for them to try to alleviate this problem, which hopefully people can.
I think that actually connects to our problems in regards to what we have with certain groups in the world that are causing so much mischief. And we see that most of the people that are in these groups and joining these groups and leaving their home countries for these deviant groups are the young and the very young, and exactly for what you said, because of lack of knowledge. And the thing is, some of these people, from what I've read, they feel disenfranchised from their communities and from the elders, and they feel like they're doing something that they feel that connects them somehow, that they feel passionate about. And as the brother was saying here, and also myself, it's about engaging them in positive ways to channel their energies, because all that useful energy left unchecked causes turmoil for everyone around us, and that's the big problem right now. So what we need is, and our elders, and when I say elders, I don't mean if we're thinking in our minds 50, 60, 70, 80. No, guys and ladies in our 30s and 40s can spend time with, mentor, and deal with those in their teens and early 20s. It doesn't have to be the extreme of, I'm 16, do I really have to deal with somebody who's 105 that can't possibly understand me? No, the 30s and 40s can deal with the teens in their early 20s and so on and so forth, and keeping them on the straight path, giving them helpful suggestions and helping them out, because we're facing a really big problem right now in the world with what you just said, with the ignorance of the religion, and people going to one extreme, into the happy-go-lucky, hippie, I can do whatever, hey, or the, I'm going to harm someone because I believe a certain way and I'm stuck in this path and I've gone just crazy.
And all that due to lack of education. Ilyas, if we can get your thoughts into this.
Yeah, I mean, a lack of education is it's crippling Muslims, really. And one thing I find in London when it comes to lack of knowledge is Islam becomes a culture rather than an actual way of life. Why is that sister wearing that hijab, for example?
It's like a gang.
Yeah, it's a gang, yeah. Why are you doing this? And what I found happens a lot of the time is people would hide certain things that they do. So, for example, happens quite a lot in a lot of Western countries. For example, a sister would leave the house in hijab, etc. As soon as she gets outside and gets a place to change, she'll change. And then just dress, Western or whatever, and have, hair out or whatever. And then when it's time for her to go back home, she'll put everything back on so the family thinks that, she's been out in hijab, etc.
In America, this is called the jumpers.
The jumpers.
I thought it was called the Superman.
No, it's something popular in Michigan where they literally go out of the window and just to go off and do whatever activity with someone who is not Muslim. And the problem with this is us as parents, when we're dealing with our children, we're not presenting Islam in a way that is helpful to solve their problems, address the youthful energy, their desires as youthful people, and how to deal with it. We're just saying, don't do this, don't do that. And we don't offer them what they can do, or any solutions. Don't do it. Okay. They need, as soon as you turn your back, they're doing it. Because the influences of other youth are stronger than the harshness that you're giving them.
Yeah.
Yes, well, and it's very true. You want to say something?
So, essentially, we're enforcing Islam on children, and when we grow up in the West, we learn, when you're 18, you do as you wish, and
That's what happened.
they're doing as they wish. So, and then by that point, it's too late to take your son or daughter to the mosque and say, "Imam, help me." It's too late. They're, adults in Westernizing now. They can do as they wish. So it's about getting people to learn their religion and understand it. Okay, this is why we don't do this. This is why we do that. Because Allah doesn't just give us rules, but there's also wisdom behind it. So it's one of the big ways people are tripped up when it comes to da'wah. The first thing they say is, hijab is for women to be modest. But no, women wear hijab because, I'm picking on hijab, but women, they wear hijab because Allah told them to do so. But there's wisdom behind it. But the second you say women wear hijab so they could be modest, you're going to get someone saying, yeah, but I know such and such that wears a hijab and she is not modest. Like, no way.
But that
And
goes
you'll
back
get someone who says, see, they don't wear hijab and they are modest.
And they are modest.
Exactly.
So we trip ourselves up. So we don't, we need to, one of the elders in the UK actually, he used to say you need to live Islam and give Islam. But in order to do the both, you need to understand Islam first.
Okay, I want to thank all you guys for joining me here tonight. We had a wonderful conversation. I mean, there's many issues and problems we could have discussed, but due to the lack of time, we were only able to cover 2 major issues. But alhamdulillah, we had a good conversation about these 2 issues. Dear viewers, I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. And until next time, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How perfect my Allah is, and I praise Him. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanallah. How perfect you are, Allah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanallah. How perfect you are, Allah. your mercy is great.